Samurai Shodown is one of the greatest icons of the fighting game genre. It is as big and as important as Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter. Now, as we're getting closer to the 30th anniversary of the MVS, the original hardware for the arcades for the Neo Geo, and also after the release of the Samurai Shodown for the PS4, the Xbox One, and PC, it is time for us to go back and review the history of the franchise. In this video, we're going to talk about all the games that have been released for the main series, the 2D fighters, and we're not going to discuss or talk about the 3D games, any game that came out for the Neo Geo CD only, for the Neo Geo Pocket, or any other home console. So stay tuned. Samurai Shodown, the original game that came out in 1993, is a 2D weapon-based fighter, technically a Street Fighter clone, but it takes a lot of inspiration also from Fatal Fury that came out in 1991, but without the two-plane dodge system. It has 12 distinct fighters and an unplayable final boss. It was gorgeous for its time. The characters, the background sprites, the deep color palette, it was really beautiful, it was unique. And it has great Japanese music in the background. The sound effects were great. It has a compelling story, a lot of traditional Japanese folklore, but there were a lot of things that were added. Even though the game is archaic by today's standards, it really introduced a lot of different things. It was not necessarily the first weapon-based game, but it was the one that popularized it in the West and all around the world. You have the dash and retreat, body toss. It has a zoom in and zoom out, which is unique for the time. Japanese version had blood and gore, and it was really difficult. It was not an easy game to end. The final boss is super cheap. It required a lot of good timing and fast pace, and there was an emphasis on that free movement. It was really difficult to defeat just the CPU. Samurai Shodown 2 came out the following year in 1994. It has 15 distinct fighters. There are 6 new characters and a returning cast with the exception of Ten and Amakusa. The story is it's a follow-up to the original, and it definitely has the same vibe. The very classical. The art was even improved more. The sprites are looking better. It's an improvement over the first one. It has better sound effects. You get less thrown objects. There are new special moves that were added for each character. Some of them were completely redone, and it is faster. You can do, I would say, the basics of a combo, although it's just pretty much the rudimentary combos. The power meter causes devastating special moves which break weapons, so it was an improvement not only on the art style but also the sound, the music. It was technically better all around. You also were introduced to the offensive blocking technique known as parry, which is technically now a staple for many games. The CPU opponents were difficult also, but not as difficult as the original. The game is faster, it's more fluid, has refined gameplay mechanics, and is considered by many probably the best in the franchise. Samurai Shodown 3 Blades of Blood came out in 1995. This is part 1 of a new story set between Samurai Shodown and Samurai Shodown 2. There's a visual overhaul with darker and grittier aesthetics. There are new cutscenes, new stages which are less animated, redrawn characters with larger sprites on screen, but the music was not as memorable as previous games. There are only 12 fighters, 6 new characters including a playable Amakusa. You can choose between 2 fighting techniques, Slash, which is really closer to the previous games, and Bust, which adds new moves, and you can choose 3 class levels, whether it's beginner, medium, or upper class. The biggest change in this game was the button layout. You now have 3 dedicated attack buttons, so it's no longer as it used to be, kind of was closer to Street Fighter. You have a light, medium, and strong attack, and you also have 1 kick. Now, there are tactical changes with priority on special moves in this game, and replacing the free movement system with a more restrained parry system. You can dodge attacks through evade or sidestep by pressing A and B. Also, switch around your opponent's back when near was something very different. There you can block attacks in midair. There is a new mechanism called Defense Breaker, which was introduced to replace the body tosses, and it takes opponents out of balance with a gentle push or a pull and open for attack. Now, this game has a really high damage count. Also, the power rage meter is rechargeable, and there's an improvement in dash and backstep. And there's very limited thrown objects in this game, which to me was good. And the final boss was really tough. You have to defeat it in 3 rounds. The pace is slower, but movement is more fluid in this game. Now, the new button layout and special attacks are user-friendly, but the new defense mechanics give room to cheap counterattacks. This may be considered the worst Samurai Shodown by most fans, but from a technical standpoint, it was a turning point for the franchise in the right direction with a lot of brilliant ideas. Samurai Shodown 4: Amakusa's Revenge came out in 1996. This is the final chapter of the story between Samurai Shodown and Samurai Shodown 2. There are 17 playable characters here. You have Charlotte, Tantan, Jubei returning, plus the full cast of the previous game. Also 2 new fighters, the Kasama brothers, who are ninja wielders of fire and water techniques. As in the previous game, the fighting technique and grade class choices return. The art style in this game was softened a bit, and the character sprites are more appealing, which is, to me, is good. Also, the animation and special moves were also improved for more enjoyable experience. The stages are more static, but less busy, but they are beautifully rendered. The music and sound feel more Japanese than ever. I feel that it was more atmospheric and less hectic, less synthesized, but it is not as iconic as Samurai Shodown 1 or 2. Now, this game have 2 life bars, which was only used in this game. There's a zoom in and zoom out, which was improved, and it was less abrupt as in previous game, and to me that was, I think, a great addition. Aerial blocking was removed in this game. Also, sidestep and switch around were slightly nerfed down, which was a welcome addition. The power meter gives more stamina for limited time through the rage explosion. The lower your life, the longer it lasts. You can then create combo slashes and fatal slashes. This game also introduced what we call suicide moves, which technically is kind of like a finishes, enabling fatality moves like Mortal Kombat. You did not get any thrown objects in this game, which to me, I really was happy for that. Now, the final bosses were really underwhelming. You had to fight 3 opponents, Amakusa and Kuro, and I pre-select the story opponent for each fighter. Now, this game makes great improvements to the foundation set by its predecessor. It feels more balanced than before. High-skilled players can turn the tide with a single well-placed attack. In many ways, this game is the technical foundation of subsequent weapon-based fighting game franchises like The Last Blade and even Guilty Gear. The game is a great start for newcomers to the franchise. Samurai Shodown 5 came out in 2003, 7 years after its predecessor. Now, this game was not developed by SNK, it was developed by Yuki Enterprise, now known as Examu. The story is set before the original Samurai Shodown game. There are 24 fighters, 3 are all alternate versions, and 4 new fighters. Now, the background and the color are a bit muted. The cutscene is not as interesting or impressive. There is an improvement in the sound with mixed Japanese music. You have electric guitars and keyboards with some rock and pop tunes. Unfortunately, the soundtrack is not as memorable or as classic or traditional as previous entries. The technique and class level choices are gone, which to me, I was very happy with this. It was replaced by introducing some variant characters. Sword and meditation gauges are introduced in this game. First one controls the damage of your attacks. The second one controls the time it takes for special attacks when in rage explosion. Also, the button layout was redrawn. You have the light attack, medium attack together as a strong attack. You got a kick and you have a special button. The special button allows you to roll forward and backwards. You can also dodge and switch around your opponent when near. In this game, attacks are more conducive to combos. Also, some special attacks have been nerfed down and rebalanced. Multiple hits from well-placed slash attacks are increased. Now, this game has no fatalities, which was a shame and a disappointment for a lot of fans. There's no real ending, or the ending is a bit incoherent. The sub-bosses in this game, Sankuro, who is a cheat, and Jumeji, and also the final boss, Gao, are super cheap opponents. In my opinion, they are the hardest bosses in the whole franchise. Now, the game is faster and more technical than ever before. However, the game feels a bit ancient in comparison to other game franchises, particularly after 7 years of its predecessor. Many longtime fans also complain about the music, the lackluster background art, and the removal of fatalities. Samurai Shodown 5 Special came out in 2004, and it was the response from SNK to disappointed fans. It was a really great update to the previous game. Now, this was the last official game for the MVS, which also makes it a very special game. Now, there are 20 fighters plus 4 previous bosses now playable. Semi-bosses like Sankura and Yumeji are still not playable in this game. Now, there are great improvements in color and art and in sound. The backgrounds are sharper and are recolored. There are more appealing stages. The soundtrack is back to more traditional Japanese arrangements. Cutscenes were also redrawn. The game feels closer to Samurai Shodown 3 in style. The fighters are rebalanced. The gameplay feels more fluid and natural. Fatalities are back and they're really dark and gory, and I mean it. This prevented the game from being released in North America for the PS2. Now, Juki and SNK did a fantastic job upgrading the original version. Not only that, they listened to the fans and delivered as requested. Samurai Shodown 5 Special is arguably among the best, or perhaps it is the best, in the whole franchise. Samurai Shodown 6 came out in 2005, and this was developed by SNK Play More. It was developed for the Atomic Wave arcade system, and the company released 6 games for the Atomic Wave before moving to Taito Type X2. Now, this game has the largest roster in the whole franchise. 45 fighters, 28 fighters from previous games, 4 former bosses, 2 sub-bosses from 5, 7 returning characters from 1, 2, and 4, and new characters and 4 playable pets. There is a new system called the Spirit Select system, which allows players to choose from 6 different fighting styles based on all previous installments. This was borrowed from SNK vs. Capcom 2. Now, the consoles offer 9 styles. Now, this game has new cutscenes, and some are good and some are okay. Now, there are new world stages with 2D and 3D elements. The backgrounds were made in high resolution. Of course, this was something that was available through the Atomic Wave. There's new flashy animation. This looked great in the arcade, but not as pretty on ported versions of the consoles. Now, the new orchestrated and symphonic music soundtrack is a departure from the traditional minyo genre. The music sound is great, but it is not as memorable. Due to the hardware, the loading times are a lot longer in this game, and particularly in consoles, which is even worse. The referee is back, the delivery guide too. The Atomic Wave hardware allows for 5 buttons to be added, so you have light, medium, and strong attacks, and you also have a kick and special button. All the traditional gameplay mechanics of previous games, it makes a return. There's also an ability to create an invisible barrier or shield around you called entire defense, kind of like Blaze Blue, by pressing light and medium slashes. This is only available for Spirit 6 and uses energy from the rage gauge. In this game, you can use Explosion Rage more than once. This is good for, I would say for newcomers to the franchise, but definitely for those that are more into the technical aspect of the game, it really nerfs the experience down a bit. Fighters have been rebalanced in this game. Some feel weaker than before, some feel more overpowered. Also, the damage level has been reduced. It takes more hits to kill an opponent. Now, this game has no blood or fatalities, and according to developers, this was done to make the game stand on gameplay alone and not on past controversy. Unfortunately, fans were disappointed with this decision. Although the game has tons of characters, everyone unlocked in the PS2 version from the start, and great 3D, 2D backgrounds, it feels lackluster and uninspiring. The gameplay is better than ever with balanced mechanics, but unfortunately it also feels repetitive and dumbed down for new players. It is fun to play for an hour or two, but not as challenging or addictive as before. The PS2 and the PS2 on PS4 versions are the worst graphically. Samurai Shodown 7, simply known as Samurai Shodown, is the reboot of the franchise that came out just this year, 2019. The story is set chronologically before the events of the original Samurai Shodown and Samurai Shodown 5. There are 16 unique fighters at launch, 3 new to the franchise, with more fighters on the way. The game is gorgeous, stunning graphics and beautiful animation. The game follows the same art style of Street Fighter 4. Classic stages in this game look better than ever. Some characters do not have a stage yet though. The traditional Japanese soundtrack is back and better than ever. As in classic Samurai Shodown fashion, effect sounds are kept to a minimum to intensify the tension. Now, this game has no English dub, so some people complain about it. In my case, I don't, because I really grew up playing this game in the Japanese versions. The game keeps the same traditional mechanics that have made Samurai Shodown so great. So it takes some of the best of the previous games and brings them back. So you get the classic 4-button layout, light, medium, strong attacks, and a kick. You also get parry, dodge, stun, and defense breaker. The full rage meter is back, which allows you to do a devastating technique attacks, so like the blade flip technique, which is a super attack that does not drain the range meter. But also you get in rage mode, you get the devastating lightning blade technique. With a full range, it can take almost 75% of the life of your opponents. This is a fatality move, and as in previous games, it can only be used once throughout the whole match, regardless of the remaining rounds. Now, the input of special moves and special attacks have been simplified to benefit all type of players, which is good and bad depending on your experience. The final boss in this game is, as usual, tough as nails. Now, the menu screen, the cutscenes are a bit flat and uninspiring when compared to other fighters. Loading times are also longer than other fighters. This game has basic modes like practice mode, which is bare bones in comparison. Also has a trial mode, a survival mode, and gauntlet mode, which technically is a survival with one round. Online mode comes with all the whistles, leaderboards, rank, and casual matches. Now, it introduced a new system called the dojo mode. You can fight your own avatar or the avatar of other players online. These avatars are known as ghosts, and they are CPU-generated opponents who mimic your fighting progress and style. They're constantly evolving, same as you. This soft reboot is a return to form. As in traditional Samurai Shodown fashion, it is all about anticipation and positioning. Every attack needs to be carefully executed. Longtime fans of the genre couldn't be more pleased with this classic approach to the fighting mechanics. Now, the game feels a bit bare bones with a lack of content, but the foundation is firmly set and it can only get better as content continues to be added as promised by the developer. Now, it is hard to determine which Samurai Shodown is the best. It is clear that with each installment the formula has been perfected while creating new challenges. For the most part, the franchise has stayed consistent with its vision and approach to the fighting genre. This is a game about timing and precision. It requires hand skills. Technically, each newer game is better than the previous one, but in my opinion, this is my list. The worst in my opinion is Samurai Shodown 3. It is the black sheep of the family for sure. Yes, the game introduced a lot of great ideas, but the execution was not as enjoyable as in the other games. It is a very tedious game when you come to think of it. It can be frustrating at times, slower than the other ones because it is more defense driven. So definitely it's one of the reasons why it is my least favorite. Number 6, Samurai Shodown 1. Yeah, Samurai Shodown 1, it is a classic. It is the one that introduced this game into pretty much the market. But when you come to look at it, when you come to play after so many years, you realize that it's very obsolete in comparison to newer installments in the franchise. Number 5, Samurai Shodown 2. Yes, Samurai Shodown 2 is an improvement over Samurai Shodown 1, and a lot of people have fun memories, including myself. But when you come to think of it, even those improvements, still the game feels old in comparison to newer games, and there are still a lot of things there that were also frustrating. Number 4, Samurai Shodown 6, the one that came out for the Atomic Wave for the arcades, more than the one that was then ported to the PS2. Now, the game is great. You know, it has great mechanics. It feels good when you play it in the arcades. However, it's limited by a lot of things. Of course, they took away from the game, and it feels that it's been nerfed down a bit, so anyone can actually pull some of the stunts or the combos, which to me that was a disappointment. But the game has a big roster. You have all the characters in one single arcade, and definitely that is a very appealing, so you have all different techniques. Number 3, Samurai Shodown 5. Yeah, Samurai Shodown 5 improved in a lot of areas, but also missed the mark in so many others. By the time that it was released, it really felt old, and most people have experienced the game only through in the West, only through the Xbox version. But the arcade was great, but it was limited, and definitely felt a bit old. Although there were a lot of improvements into the genre, it has very tough CPU opponents, which can be frustrating. But definitely the game mechanically it's better than its predecessors. Number 2, Samurai Shodown 4. This is, to me, my favorite on the list. This, I would say it is number 1 for me. But Samurai Shodown 4 definitely make a lot of improvements over the foundation set by Samurai Shodown 3. And it's really enjoyable experience. I like it, the art, I like the sound, I like the color, I like the graphics, and I feel that it's very fluid. It's still, you know, there were some limitations to the game, but I have so many great memories, and it's definitely one of the best in the whole franchise. Number 1, Samurai Shodown 5 Special. And I can tell you one thing, this game deserves to be number 1. Now, I haven't really played as much of it as I wanted to, but when you come to play it and when you come to see it, when you come to experience it, you realize that this is a great improvement over the vanilla version. And it is the best and more complete. In my opinion, it's better than Samurai Shodown 6 because it felt more like a Samurai Shodown game. It has more tension, it has fatalities, it has everything we know, the blood, the gore, and it feels very Japanese in the performance. Even the music feels very Japanese. And definitely it is, by all accounts, a Samurai Shodown installment and the best, arguably the best in the franchise. Now, I did not include Samurai Shodown 7, the reboot, on this list because it is hard to know where Samurai Shodown stands right now, or this newer game, in comparison to the other ones. Yes, it does have a lot of great mechanics, it looks beautiful, but it is bare bones with not enough content to really put it on this list yet. That doesn't mean that it will happen. The game's still in development, even though we already have it. It's just the foundation. We still waiting for more characters to be added, the seasons to be expanded. Definitely would like to see more stages, refinements to the mechanics, and also to the different modes in the game. It feels like still bare bones in comparison to the previous installments, but I feel that it has the right formula and is going in the right direction. So only time will tell. I can tell you that it's up there with the top 3 right now, but for the time being, I would just simply put it aside, and maybe in the future I will make a determination about which position, if it's the best in the whole franchise. But I will leave it. I will leave that to you. Samurai Shodown is truly a gem among many fighting games. It is one that I've been supportive since pretty much day one, since 1993 when the first one came out. I'm a big fan of the franchise as a whole. I've been supportive of it as much as I can. So I'm very glad that now we have a new game and that the younger generation is able to be introduced to this game. But what is your opinion? Are you a fan? Have you played this new Samurai Shodown game? Are you a fan of any of the games that I mentioned on this list? Please let me know in the comments below. So once again, thanks for watching. God bless, and I'll talk to you again. Bye-bye.